Hello there, so in this video I'm going to be showing you how to use parted magic with WxFixBoot to repair the bootloaders on your Linux installations. So, what you need to do is go to Boot Utilities from the main menu and find WxFixBoot. And when it starts, it will start collecting all sorts of information about your system, which I'll show you in a second. Normally this doesn't take very long, but it depends on what operating systems you have and how many there are and all of that kind of stuff. If you have Windows or Mac OS, it will also detect that for you. So, main options here, save a system report I would recommend, just in case you need to ask me a support question. You can see diagnostic terminal output if you want to. You can also check your file systems, which just does, so the quick check is just like a basic integrity check, and thorough will also check for bad sectors if you want to, but we're not going to do that today. So with regards to system information, you can see what you see in DD Rescue GUI. It's exactly the same information here, but you've also got lots more stuff, so like another couple of panes for disk info, and then you've got the operating systems you have and where they are. So you can see we've got Fedora 31 and Ubuntu 18.4. You have bootloader information, so what bootloaders you have, where they're booting from if it's been able to detect, but don't worry if it hasn't. What operating system they're booting by default, bootloader timeouts, kernel options, all that kind of stuff, which is all potentially useful. And if Windows or Mac OS is installed, it should come up in this list as well. So, I'm also just going to quickly show you the privacy policy, which essentially says some information needs to be collected for WxFixBoot to run, but it will only collect information that it needs or that is important to you, like some of the disk information that I just showed you, and it won't report any of this. That's basically what this policy says. So I don't harvest any of your personal data. Next we're going to go to bootloader options, and what we are going to do for Fedora 31 is just reinstall it, and I'm going to change the menu timeout to 0 because I don't need to see the boot menu here. If you want to, you can also pick a different default operating system to boot, but I'm okay with that. If you need to change your kernel options, that's under here. So it's just a big list of every kernel option your bootloader has, which in this case, all of these are fine for me, so I'll just keep them. If you want to, you can back up your configuration now, which means that if you change your bootloader kernel options, let's say, and then it doesn't work, you can boot back into Parted Magic, give it your configuration file, and it will set everything back to how it was. But I'm not going to demonstrate that today. So for Fedora, all we're going to do is reinstall and change the menu timeout. If all you want to do is change your kernel options or your timeout or your default OS, you can just update the configuration. So for Ubuntu 18.04, it will tell me I have no EFI partition, so I can't select an EFI bootloader, which is fine. I don't need one. But if you want to switch to an EFI bootloader, you will need to create an EFI partition and set it up first, so it's just an informational thing. And I should note, if you want to, you can see OS information here, and here's another link to your system information if you need to see it. So, for Ubuntu 18.04, I'm going to replace grub with Lilo, and it's going to say I have more than one operating system, and yeah, I don't mind, that's okay. You don't want Lilo if you have loads of operating systems, because it doesn't always handle multi-boot as well as grub, but in my case this is fine. But you can also switch back to grub if you want to. Again, you can do that manually, or you can back up and restore your configuration if you need to. But in Ubuntu's case, there are many fewer kernel options. So I'll just leave that. The timeout is also 0. I'm going to change that to 3. Because I want to. So that's that. And if it hasn't been able to detect what bootloader you have, it will just show up as unknown, and it may or may not get kernel options, but regardless you can still use the same interface to replace the bootloader and change your kernel options or set your kernel options if it hasn't found them. So either way it will work, when you're all ready, click Apply, and it will tell you stay within sight of the system, just because it's not fully unattended. And because we're replacing the bootloader, we need an internet connection. So we'll test this first for us, rather than start an operation that might then fail. So hit OK. I'm going to show the terminal output because I like seeing it. And you'll see there's loads of text scrolling here because I have it in diagnostic mode. So you can sort of see it working through everything. It will make sure package manager's free. It will then remove your old bootloader and tell you that it's done it. So now it's going to reinstall it in Fedora, which shouldn't take too long. Just need to download package information and then... that's an interesting error. Writing received data to disk failed. So it will now download package information if it needs to. You can see my internet connection isn't doing particularly great, but it will. Here we go. So now it will download the packages. It might fail the first time if your internet connection is bad, like you just saw with me, but you can just retry as many times as you need to if it comes to it. But with luck, it will just work the first time. So now it's collecting information to make the grub configuration file. And it's worth noting that sometimes this takes quite a long time, especially if you've got a lot of operating systems. So you can see here, it doesn't look like it's doing anything. There's no more output, there's no more status information. And this kind of tends to happen especially when you've got Fedora or an operating system with logical volumes. But regardless, it will eventually complete. It can just take a couple of minutes, so I will speed this up for you. Here we go. So you got some progress now. It says it's found Ubuntu, found Fedora. So now it's set the bootloader configuration, install the bootloader, and we have our wait again, because it always updates grub twice, because that's just how the installation works. Here we go. So it says it's found Ubuntu and it's found Fedora. Okay, so that's one done. You can see our overall progress has bumped along now. So it will test the internet connection again, which is done. So as before, it will wait until the package manager is free, just in case anything was using it. And it will now remove your old bootloader, which in this case is grub. And now it will install Lilo. Please note that Lilo won't be supported for that much longer in WxFixBoot because Lilo is no longer maintained, but some people do still need to use Lilo if they have particularly awkward hardware or an older operating system. Sometimes grub just doesn't work on particular hardware. So setting configuration, all done. Okay, so now we'll create the system report, and I wouldn't recommend you do this. You should save this to a USB stick, but in my case, I'm just going to save this to Parted Magic's desktop, because I don't need to keep it, I'm just going to show you what's in it. So if anything went wrong at this point, you can hit restart and change settings and try again, but everything was fine, so we'll just exit. And I'm not going to save the log file because we've got our system report here. So I'll just show you what's in the system report, which is pretty useful if something has gone wrong and you want support. So it will tell you what your firmware type was, all of the disks on your system, what kind of file system they have, all that same stuff in the disk and the system information window, any operating systems that were found and their details. So like what architecture they're on, what partition they're installed on, whether they're currently running or were running, boot partitions, EFI partitions, all that kind of stuff. Bootloader configuration for each one, FixBoot settings and terminal output, and then the log files tacked onto the bottom. So this is pretty much everything you might need to give me so that I can help you fix any problem you might have. So that's very useful if anything has happened. So that is that. So you should now be able to restart your system and boot into Ubuntu or Fedora. So I will do that now. In this case, this is a virtual machine, but it doesn't matter. It would work exactly the same way on physical hardware. So I'll just restart, and I will tell a VirtualBox to boot from hard disk 1, which is, this is Lilo. So this is Ubuntu 18.04, and it's created menu entries for each one. So we've got a recovery entry and Fedora entries. So I'll just boot Ubuntu normally, and we'll just get all the normal boot messages. Sometimes they're hidden with Lilo, that does happen. But as you can see, it's booting. It should take us to the desktop in a second. And everything looks fine. This is just because I don't have the guest editions. Okay, so now we'll boot into Fedora. Fast forward this for you. Okay, here we go. So this time we will boot into Fedora, which should be disk 2, which had no timeout if you recall, so it should just boot straight into Fedora, which is what it looks like it's doing. Here we go. So I've boot screen. There we go. All working nice and fine. So I am aware that this may have been a bit quick for 2 operating systems and all the options that are in FixBoot. So I'm going to make some follow-up tutorials on my blog which cover more specific parts of this detail, like your backing up and restoring configuration and doing file system checks and stuff like that. But I'm also in the process of writing a full user guide for WxFixBoot, so you should be able to follow along in that format if you want to as well. Having said that, I hope this video has been useful to you, and see you in the next one.